Hi, guys. Got an agenda in front of everybody. I think we got an email with them sent. We'll do introductions initially. Tim, would you like to start?
I'm Tim Dola, Handy County Administrator. We will be staffing you between myself and our Secretary Kelly Darby, who's not here tonight. She's in Delaware, but you'll see her at future meetings, and she will be your primary contact. So you'll receive emails from her and probably communicate directly with her. She's going to try to coordinate this group, but tonight you get the B team. So that's it.
Charlie Wiltsey, Ogemaw County Commissioner.
Jenny David, Ogemaw County Commissioner.
Shannon Davidson, Peer Recovery Specialist, Asaba Valley CMH.
I'm Blair Smalley. I'm the school social worker at the elementary at Whittemore Prescott Schools. So,
Tara Rose, probation for all.
Mike Bowers, Emergency Management Coordination.
Sharon St. Germain, RN coordinator for my Michigan Health substance use programs.
Ladonna Schultz, Ogemaw County Prosecutor.
Ryan Gilbert, Ogemaw County Sheriff.
Brett Gilden, Ogemaw County Clerk.
Amy Delinky, Michigan Association of Counties.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Review of committee purpose and function.
In the packet you have in front of you, you've got on the second page after the rest of the agenda is the resolution that the Board of Commissioners adopted to establish this committee. Just follow along with me on this. I'll add some other commentary to the statements that are on here so you get a good idea of what the committee is all about. Back in November of 2021, the board passed a resolution to authorize entry into an interstate agreement concerning allocation of opioid settlement proceeds. What happened? I'm going to say, Ladonna, you probably don't have the exact date, but a couple of years ago, a number of municipalities in Michigan got together and said, you know, this opioid issue is a real issue, and those responsible ought to be accountable for helping us navigate some of the issues and challenges that we're facing in the counties. And we have some cities that were involved in that as well. So collectively, they were able to get a hold of actually a few law firms in Michigan that took the cause up. This was a national settlement, as it turns out. In Michigan, at some point midway through all of this, the Attorney General's office said, hey, wait a minute, we should be the ones taking the lead for the state. And through all the various proceedings, that's what's happened now. So we've got the Attorney General's office taking the lead, but working in concert with the attorneys that were hired by the municipalities. Starting last year, in fact, right around November, in our case, a number of these cases began to settle, and they were settling for fairly large amounts of money to be given to the local municipalities to help address the opioid concerns. Amy's going to get into that in a lot more detail in her presentation, but this is a fluid situation. We've just adopted a resolution today that includes now Walgreens into the settlement, and there's roughly $430,000 that will come to Ogemaw County. But you'll see here the numbers that you have on the second paragraph. At the time the resolution was passed in November, the county was looking at about a $1.9 million piece of the settlement over 18 years, so roughly $107,000 each year to address opioid concerns. This will not be an even installment. This is just the average. Our first installment came in at roughly $372,000, and that arrived late last year, maybe it was early this year, but it's set aside now in a special fund at the county for use only for the opioid settlements. And so Amy will also talk about some of the uses for those funds. We just added the Walgreens settlement to that today, and I understand there may be a couple of others yet in the wings. So this is still fluid. But what you're seeing on this resolution are really the floor numbers, if you will. The numbers will only go up from there.
Tim, just a question. Is that 1.9 million plus 400,000 for Walgreens plus?
Right, and we had another settlement a few months ago. CVS was involved in that, and then Walmart was involved in it. But so there have been 3 now settlement resolutions that the board has accepted. And as I said, there's a couple of others that were out there. I just saw something this afternoon about the big company, Purdue, And the Supreme Court just vacated whatever that resolution was, and now they're going to hear the case. So I have no idea how that's going to shake out. That seemed to be one of the larger corporations that was responsible for a lot of what happened. So that's going to be one that's going to be worthy of watching. Down at the bottom, under the list of members, and by the way, if you haven't said it to the full group, Gail Hughley is being replaced by Tricia Ziegler. That action was taken this morning at the board meeting. Gail really would want to be a part of the group, but she has consistent conflicts with her time. And so Tricia is taking her place, also representing the West Branch Rose City Schools. So it's good that we still have that representation. Now, that very last paragraph on that front page really gets to the responsibilities of this committee. And that is to recommend uses for the settlement funds for community assessment and opioid abatement purposes. We've listed a few: enhancing addiction treatment, evaluating and implementing community-based prevention, and increase the adoption of best practices. Some of these are kind of vague, and when Amy even gets into what we call the Appendix E uses, some of those are still vague too, and I think we're going to see them come into greater focus as time goes on as to what's going to be allowed for expenditure and what isn't. The decision-making authority rests still with the county board. You are an advisory board. You're not going to be saddled with having to make a final decision on anything. You are the recognized group that is probably closest to the issue in the county, and your input's going to be extraordinarily valuable to the board as they determine where the priorities are. Because frankly, the board, myself, we don't live this. You do. You are right there on the front line, so you see what's happening, and you'll definitely generate ideas on how best to use these funds. Now, a bit of the housekeeping on the second page or in the back of that resolution, you have my handout. It's the standards of conduct policy that the board adopted earlier this year. This isn't meant to overwhelm you. It really is common sense stuff. If we have, for instance, before you a group of vendors to provide some type of service and you are related to somebody that's a participant or a vendor that is making a proposal, you want to recuse yourself so that you're not accused of any bias. I don't think that's going to happen here. I said that with the board, though, and the very first time we said let's declare conflicts, there were conflicts to declare. So, it's a good thing. It's a good check just to make sure that we all understand. And the key is that we're just exposing that there is a potential of a conflict. That doesn't mean we have to leave or do anything. We're just making everybody aware there's a relationship here. And frankly, unless half of the group has that kind of a conflict, it really isn't going to be a problem. But it's all about the transparency, telling everybody we're above board, we're telling you this now, and everybody's aware when we move on. The second item, or the last one on the resolution, to make you aware of is that this is a public group, a public body, officially appointed by the board, meaning you are subject to the Open Meetings Act. What does that mean to you? Well, not a whole lot. We will take care of all the posting issues. We'll make sure that your agenda is moving forward. We'll always have a spot for public comment, although I don't expect a lot of public here. But if we ever do have public comment as a public body, we're compelled to allow the public to participate at some point. And if need be, we could impose the same rules that the board has, limiting comment to 3 minutes and moving on. That being said, if somebody shows up at this meeting, they probably have some sort of knowledge that you're going to benefit from. And so it's perfectly fine, particularly if there's only 1 or 2 people in the room, to have them participate in your conversations. That's what this group's about, is to talk about these things, work out the best possible solutions that we can. And I think to stifle any comment would probably be to our detriment overall. So we can play it by ear. If we get a room full of 100 people, yeah, that's got to be controlled. But if there's 1 or 2 and they're experts in a field, we probably want to let them have free rein to really help us in terms of molding our program. So that is the housekeeping business in a nutshell. Also, because it's an open meeting at board, I'll be taking minutes tonight, and Kelly will be taking them in the future. They will be, not great detail, probably won't even be a full page in some cases. So, tonight's minutes will show that you've convened, show who was present. We'll mention that I went over these housekeeping matters. We'll mention that Amy had a presentation. Any discussion, any points, as we set future meeting dates, that'll be in there, and that'll be the end of it. It's not going to be a full-blown narrative of what happened here. Now, we do have the Zoom capability. I'll put Tom on the spot. I know we're recording this. Are we going to post this on our webpage? Tom, do you know what the intent is? This isn't our equipment, so I don't even know what we can do.
There's
The
a sign.
meeting is being recorded and it's up to you guys what you want to do with the video.
I would suggest it would be a good idea that we have Tom, we've got a YouTube page right now where the Board of Commissioners meetings are posted. You may want to post yours as well. And I say that because, we do get hits on there now and then. We're not competing with commercial TV by any stretch, but I'm pretty confident as we get going, particularly because there are dollars involved and we have potential vendors or service providers in the area, they're going to tune into your meeting and listen to what you're talking about, maybe generate some ideas and come to a future meeting or send us some material to consider. So I think that would be a really positive move if your meetings were posted. I'm not going to make that call for you. I'll let you do that. It's your group, but I think that would be a very positive move.
I agree with that. Is that something that we should vote on?
I think if you get heads nodding, I think that's good enough.
Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Will it be separate? It'll be on the county website then. It'll just be labeled separately.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So you'll be able to identify exactly what you're talking about. So the rest of the agenda, Amy's going to go over, I think, an excellent presentation. We'll give you a flavor of what the issue looks like in Ogemaw County. The presentation is rich with statistics, and a lot of background, not just about the population here, but the types of opioids, I guess, that we're dealing with. And there are some other maybe deeper dives that we'll be able to do depending on the direction this group wants to go. We will want to talk about future meetings after Amy is finished. I don't know if you want to be monthly or exactly how you want to do this. Just in my own mind, knowing what we're up against in terms of creating a plan, monthly meetings will probably be a good idea, at least initially. But remember, these funds are going to be spread over 18 years. So at some point, if we have a very good plan that's very effective, we don't need a lot of changes to it. You may want to reduce that to a quarterly or twice a year type meeting just to take stock of how things are going. But at least in the short term, you're probably looking at monthly and probably going to get bombarded with things like what Amy's going to go through here tonight. And from there, we'll hopefully be able to formulate our plan. So but with that, without any questions, we can turn the floor over to Amy.
Amy, thank you for coming.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Apologies for my voice. I had some complications from surgery. So just bear with me. I'm not 100%, but let me get this set up really quickly. And I don't have a clicker, so I'll probably just stand here and move through some of these slides. So I'm the technical advisor on the opioid settlement funds with the Michigan Association of Counties. My position started in November and ends next September. So a really short-term position with the goal of getting counties kind of on track for long-term planning, sustainable solutions to address the opioid settlement funds. We are providing a lot of technical assistance, which I'll talk about kind of at the end of this presentation. But all the technical assistance that I provide is of no cost to the county. And then there's about 17 other technical assistance providers that I can access both within the state and nationally if there's something that you all need that I do not bring to the table. For a little bit of my background, I have previously been the senior advisor for the state's opioid strategy with MDHHS. I've managed a national overdose program with CDC Foundation. I've worked in local county government doing strategic planning around substance use. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. A lot of different perspectives and experiences that I bring to the table that I hope that you guys will be willing to kind of utilize in this process. But I want to start with a really big general overview of where we're at with each of the settlements. There are many, and we don't have all the information yet. So the ones that you're most likely to hear about at this point moving forward are going to be distributors and J&J. They were the first two settlements to pay out. Those payments began to local governments on January 31st of this year. There was a bit of a delay because of a lawsuit related to one specific county. The other settlements that should start paying shortly, Walgreens, CVS, Teva, and Allergan. Those are 4 separate settlements, but from the county perspective, a single sign-on to that kind of pharmacy and manufacturer space. McKinsey only went to the state, will not go to locals. Mallinckrodt, a very different layout, which I'll explain in a bit. Miter, not a national settlement. You guys did not sign on to that settlement. Only 4 counties did. I think most folks just didn't hear about it. And then we do have a few more that are coming, like Purdue and Endo are the 2 largest that we know about. But primarily this is going to be, especially with these first 6, a 50-50 split between how much money goes to state government and how much money is divided locally. And when I say local governments, counties, townships, and cities. Now, if a city or township decides not to sign on, meaning they don't want to receive their funds, maybe that amount is too small. If the county has signed on, those funds are redirected to the county. But if the county does not sign on, those funds are redirected to all counties. So always important to have that county sign on and maybe a reason for additional funds for you all to receive. Right now, the estimated total is over $3 million for your county. This does not include Walgreens, and this does not include the 3 settlements that are in the bankruptcy process. So Mallinckrodt, Purdue, and Endo, you will not receive direct distribution of those funds from any of those 3 settlements. However, you may receive funds. We don't know yet. That's something I'll get into in a bit. But Walgreens is really the one missing here in this total. So fund management, these funds, as was said, are already in kind of this separate bucket. Always important to create that. Now that fund may also need sub-funds. Reporting requirements, allowable uses are going to differ. The first 6 settlements have the same allowable uses and same reporting requirements. But when we look at Mallinckrodt, Purdue, and Endo, those are going to be different. So they may require a separate sub-fund. This is a general overview of the length of time, maximum number of payments. This does not mean number of years. Maximum number of payments can really be done at any time. So with distributors, you may see, I think with J&J, so far you've seen 5 payments already come in. With distributors, you've already seen 2 come in, which means next year you probably won't receive any money at all. Then when you do receive that next payment, it's potentially going to be 50,000 less or 50,000 more than the year before, and maybe 1 payment, maybe multiple payments. So determining that number that everyone's comfortable with for sustainability purposes on an annual basis is going to be critical moving forward. I think with all of that, most folks are saying we don't have our Walgreens money, so we'll base everything on everything up until that, and Walgreens will just be those additional funds. But it really depends on the amount of funds received by that county. So with the distribution, we just kind of talked about that. The biggest thing I want to highlight here is that companies cannot skip consecutive years in payments. So they may not pay for 1 year, but they will have to pay the following year. I put the links in here for the allocation notices if we wanted to see which townships and cities in your county have received funds. It would be in this list, and it would give you exact dollar amounts as how much was given to each county as well. So looking at J&J and distributors, these are 2 distinct settlements, but we typically talk about them together because of the way that the state did the sign-on process, as well as the fact that they really have a lot of similarities. So with these 2, it is going to be a 50-50 split between local subdivisions and the state. And then there's also going to be Exhibit E. So Exhibit E is going to be used for J&J, distributors, and we'll get into this a bit more, CVS, Teva, Allergan, and Walmart. And that is really the list of allowable uses. I think what's most critical for this committee to understand is that these funds are being given to the county, not because the county was harmed, but because the community was harmed. And none of the activities in Exhibit E are at all punitive. They are really focused on prevention, treatment, harm reduction, recovery, with those key components in mind of helping the individuals most profoundly impacted by this crisis. So anything punitive would not be recommended. But when we talk about what is allowable, it's also important to recognize what's allowable in your county may not be allowable in the county next door. And that's because that determination is left up to corporate counsel at each county individually. And so we can dig into that piece a little bit, but it will change how this looks across the state. With the reporting piece for J&J distributors, it's required that every 6 months a report is put into the payment portal. The payment portal is something where you access the funds, but really only 3 people at the county level have access to that. And they would put in, their direct deposit information to receive those funds, but it's also where they put in those reports. Now, out of these funds, there's only 85% that have to be used for opioid remediation, and then 15% that are unrestricted. So other needs that the county has. Now, most counties are pushing that into opioid remediation money, but you're not legally required to do so. I think the other piece that kind of comes into play with reporting is that 85% you don't actually report on. You only report on any funds that are used for non-opioid remediation purposes. So this also kind of creates another challenge. And I think something that I would really hope that this committee would take on is what type of transparency is this group going to ask for or provide? What type of information do we want to gather from folks that we're contracting with? How do we want to really treat this the way that we treat other grants? Even though these are not grant funds, can we still implement some of those same practices around reporting, around metrics, around measuring and understanding what success means with these funds?
Now, can I ask a question, or should I wait to the very end?
No, go ahead.
So do these settlements have any audit requirements? And
No.
if so, does it have to be independent, or could it be through the general county audits?
No audit requirements.
Can this committee advise that we have an independent audit?
Absolutely.
It would definitely be included in our annual audit. That would be one of the funds that's part of that. Now, we talked about something that's independent even of that audit, just.
Well, that was my question. Do we need an independent audit, or is it going to be with the county's annual audit incorporated through there? And can we advise maybe to have our own independent audit? It's a lot of money. Yeah.
I agree.
Kick that around, maybe you can bring in our auditor to talk to us about what is the standard practice in their field.
Especially when, did I understand you correctly, 85% you don't have to report?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absurd.
You heard.
It is. Yeah, so part of this is really specific to Michigan. So when the AG's office created the state subdivision agreement, they did not want to mandate reporting on locals. I think for a lot of reasons, and many counties also appreciate that, but it does create these real challenges in what that looks like at the state level, at max level. How do we know that these dollars are actually, one, being used for their intended purpose, and then 2, how do we know how they're impacting the state of the overdose crisis within the state?
So that brings up another question. So the way I'm picturing this is we're kind of a pass-through, because the county's not going to set up programming for, let's say, rehabilitation, for example. We would probably give monies to like Osaba Valley or the health department, who already has programming in place. So those funds that we give, are they restricted, or once we give them, they're unrestricted funds that they can use for anything? And do they have to report back to us on how those funds are used? And if they don't, can we require that?
I think I can answer that is that when the county decides that yes, we're going to contract with whomever, we literally put together a contract,
Okay.
which will have that spelled out. And our corporation council is very good at that, of making sure reporting requirements are in there, and specifically what those requirements are and what to do if funds are spent in a way that was not intended, calling them back. So I think we'll have that covered. I think the difficult or more challenging part will be to define what it is we expect.
Right.
in terms of the service, the reporting requirement we want in there. Obviously, just for the board's sake, for their own transparency, they don't want to just throw money out and say, we don't know what happened. If they're asked at a open meeting, they want to be able to say this is where that money went, and if you want a detailed report.
And it might be nice even to have some type of matrix on how successful the
Yes.
program was, to
Yes.
see if we wanted to continue funding it in the future. So,
And then I think the other piece to keep in mind is even if you contract out all of your dollars, it is still the folks with access to the payment portal that are responsible for submitting those reports on a biannual basis. And then let's say a contractor spends in a way that does not align with the definition of opioid remediation, which I'll provide in a minute, or Exhibit E, the county is really the entity that can be sued by the AG's office who's responsible for enforcement. And so the enforcement procedure is unclear at this time, but most likely the folks that will be reporting to the AG's office stating, we don't think our county is spending appropriately, is really going to be the general public. So that's a couple of these and probably a bunch more slides I covered in all of that. The pharmacy and manufacturer settlement, CVS, Teva, Allergan, Walmart, and now Walgreens. Walgreens is a little separate in Michigan because there was a separate lawsuit between the state and Walgreens where the state received additional funds on top of the settlement funds. So distribution for these has not started. No local governments or the state have received funds from any of these companies. Again, same reporting requirements. I do want to add, of that 85% that has to be used for opioid remediation, 70% is really earmarked for future opioid remediation, so any activity that's not taken place, but there is a 15% kind of cushion to reimburse the county for activities that have taken place so far. So when we look at allowable uses, everything I just said is really in this slide about the different percentages. And then I wanted to also kind of go over the definition of opioid remediation, because the two things that you'll want to make sure everything aligns with are the definition of opioid remediation and Exhibit E, that list of allowable uses. So addressing misuse and abuse of opioid products, treating or mitigating opioid use or related disorders, and then really any other alleged effects. So this is really broad. And what I really am excited about is that most counties are really understanding that when we're talking about the opioid crisis, we're not really talking about opioids. We're really talking about polysubstance use. We're really talking about general substance use disorder. We're talking about co-occurring mental health and substance use disorder. And all of this language allows for that. And I would really encourage this group to be thinking more broadly, because over 18 years, the last 18 years, we've seen significant changes within the drug overdose environment, and we can anticipate the same types of changes going forward. And so thinking long-term, thinking what is going to be sustainable over time and what's really going to get to the root cause of substance use, as opposed to just addressing one substance at a time. I'm sure you guys are seeing an increase in stimulant use here. We're really seeing that everywhere. And so just addressing one substance at a time is really not going to get to the core of addressing this crisis. So reporting requirements, we went over the top portion of this, but I do want to highlight that the Michigan Association of Counties does anticipate sending out an annual voluntary survey to counties to ask where funds are being spent. This will be something that is really brief and really universal, and ideally provide definitions, right? Because my definition of harm reduction and your definition of harm reduction may be very, very different. And so trying to understand what buckets is funding going into, we would love to be able to highlight where funds are going on our dashboard on our website. I'm not sure if you all have seen our website, but I'll pull up the dashboard for you here in a second. And one way to kind of easily know what we're expecting to put into our survey is to look at some of the templates that we've created on the website. So we have pass-through entity contracts, we have vendor contracts, spend plan templates, proclamations, you name it, there's typically a template for it. And if you don't see something you want, let me know and I will create it. Typically can get that done for you in less than 24 hours. So anything that you can, there's an RFP and an RFP scoring template, all sorts of stuff available on our website. So additional settlements, let me just jump to the bottom here because it's easier to talk about. Purdue and Endo, both in bankruptcy plans right now. We do not know what is going to happen with these. They are going to take time. What I anticipate is there will be no direct distribution of funds to local governments, but these funds will all have to flow through the state level. The reason I say this is specifically because of what we're seeing with Mallinckrodt. So the first payments for Mallinckrodt came in. There's only 5 counties that will receive direct distribution of funds. They have the largest populations in the state. So they'll receive direct distribution, and that money is coming out of a 70% chunk of funds that is intended for regional use. And then there's also 30% for non-regional use, but 100% minus the 5 counties of those funds goes to the state. And then the state uses the Michigan Opioids Task Force. Although they have not met in a year, that group will be determining through their recommendations how those funds are distributed. And then there is a map on MAC's website that highlights what each region is. They're really aligned with the prepaid inpatient health plan regions. If you guys are already kind of working on that space, but we don't know what that will look like. Will those funds go to community-based organizations? Will they go to county governments? Will they go to, local businesses? We don't know yet. So I will keep you guys updated as we know more about how the Mallinckrodt funds will be distributed. Now, the other problem with Mallinckrodt is we're expecting 37 million statewide, but we did see that they are possibly renegotiating and filing a second bankruptcy, which would mean that we will not receive those funds. Or a different amount, we don't know, but most likely there will be a significant delay in distribution of funds related to this settlement. So this is kind of an overview of the dashboard that's on MAC's website. It's the Opioid Settlement Resource Center. So at the top right corner, you can see that I've already chosen your county from a drop down. And that gives you kind of an overview in the table. And then also on the left here, an overview kind of more in a graphic. This section here at the bottom talks about total amounts for local and state share, as well as reporting requirements if you scroll over on a desktop computer. And then on the bottom right is going to be the number of payments. But also at the top, you can see we have other tabs available. So technical assistance shows kind of who's engaged with MAC at this point. We're looking at about 30 counties that have not engaged. And then engagement planning, management, and strategies. That's all information around readiness, county readiness to spend in this space. Only 30 counties responded to the survey. I would not say this is the greatest data that's been available, but our hope is to be able to, with that voluntary annual survey on where funds are going, be able to provide that information as well as links to where each county has transparent information about their use of settlements. So that's the hope for the future of this. I wouldn't anticipate that until early next year. So the recommended steps for spending, January 31st, the day those funds started going to local governments, I released the Michigan Association of Counties in partnership with Vital Strategies, the company that I also work for. We released a toolkit, guide for local spending, and that's on our website as well. And while you all, excuse me, I'm sorry, so sorry. While you may or may not use that tool, I would really recommend taking a look at it. It is linked in the presentation if you have the electronic version, but I did want to walk through kind of the 4 core tenets of that space. It's really a process document, but also provides a lot of additional resources. You'll see that the information at the front, the overview of each of the settlements is clearly outdated now as this is changing every day. But the first is stakeholder engagement. So making sure all the right folks are at the table, recognizing that each community has local experts. making sure that folks with lived experience are a part of this process, and thinking through, are there other folks that we need to be partnering with? You know, do you have 4 townships that aren't quite sure what to do with their small pots of money, and can your planning efforts tie together? The second of which is around gathering information. So not only potentially doing community needs assessments, stakeholder engagement through needs assessments, landscape analyses, gap inventories. There's a lot of different tools that can be utilized to really understand the better picture, or using the My Celerity data that's available through the health department may also be another way to look at some quantitative data as you also look at some of that qualitative data to really understand who's most profoundly impacted in the county, where are folks most profoundly impacted in the county, and are there places where we really need to focus or we're unaware of some of the things happening, or does everything validate what we thought we already knew? And then here again is the link to, well, there's links on both of these pages, but I've also put together a resource library. I tried to keep it small. I was not successful. So if there's something that you're looking for or something that you want to know if it's out there, feel free to just call or email me and I can find it for you. But it has a lot of tools for local governments, national recommendations. One of the documents that if you've not looked at already that I think is always beneficial are the principles for spending from Johns Hopkins. Those are nationally accepted principles that we hope that every county really takes into account through their planning process, pushing for things like accountability and transparency, pushing for things like youth prevention, making sure that funds are used to supplement and not supplant, a few different things that they have in that document as well. I did provide some information on places where you can easily, from an individual standpoint, access county-specific data around overdose. Your health department does have a lot more data that is available to them through My Celerity. And we will be doing a webinar at the end of next month to really talk about what data the health department does have access to for folks that may not be aware. And then really determining that process moving forward. So trying to create a document that actually applied to all counties in Michigan was really not an option. And so recognizing that where each of those last 3 steps land folks is a really different place. And so some counties maybe have a strategic plan around substance use that they enacted a few years ago, and they can determine from their strategic plan, we're already ready to spend. So we had a few of those counties. Some counties said, we want to do a full-on countywide strategic planning process to address all substance use. We don't just want to focus on settlements. So they're kind of going that route. Other counties said, we just want to have our one committee and do a few community stakeholder sessions and some community engagement. And other counties said, we don't want any stakeholder engagement at all. The county's making all these decisions. So we've really seen everything done in Michigan. But really the goal here was determining where that is and then creating kind of that long-term strategy and thinking about the sustainability of this over that. And then reporting and evaluation. So we kind of touched on this already. I'm excited that you all are thinking about and excited about requiring specific metrics for reporting from vendors or contractors. I think that is something that is absolutely critical in this process, but also thinking through just transparency in general. So knowing that you guys will have your meetings online, your minutes online, that this meeting will be open to the public. You know, will it be promoted to the public or just open to the public from that website? So thinking through all those different pieces, monitoring, accountability, evaluation, huge aspects here, but also something that there is technical assistance for. So outside of myself, one of the technical assistance providers I work most closely with is through MDHHS. They've contracted with MSU, U of M, and Wayne State University to provide specific spaces of technical assistance. So if a community would like to do a needs assessment, that is free through MSU. If a community would like to have evaluation support, that is free through Wayne State University. And then there are ongoing webinars that U of M is providing. If this group ever has interest in accessing any of those technical assistance aspects. I'm trying to stay out of those spaces so we can all kind of work here together. But what's important to recognize is feel free to reach out to me. I can make a referral, get you in contact with them same day, week max, if those are things that you want to move forward with. And then once you have, let's say, a needs assessment in hand, let's connect again, figure out what those next steps might be. I'm here as much or as little as you all want me here, and at least until September of 2024. All right, so the technical assistance piece, I did want to provide a few different pieces here. If you all have not seen, I can't expect that anyone will have read the 75-page document, but the Opioid Advisory Commission put together an incredibly detailed report on where we're at in Michigan with settlements. There is a two-pager available also, but their report has incredible information, great recommendations, none of which were adopted by the legislature at this point. They are an advisory body to the legislature, so we'll see how that progresses in the future. Johns Hopkins and the National Association of Counties put out a quick guide to doing a needs assessment. Some communities, of course, don't want outsiders coming in to talk to their folks. And so if you all wanted to do a needs assessment on your own, this is a great tool. MDHHS is supposed to, I've been saying this since February, by the end of this month, we hope that their website is up and running. I hope by the end of the year, their website is up and running. There's some information on there, but a lot of what they're going to be putting up really links to MAC's website, which is really the only accessible information right now in the state on settlements. And then one other thing to kind of be on the lookout for, the National Association of Counties, Johns Hopkins, and Vital Strategies will be putting out another tool for metrics. So when you say, what type of things do we want to capture in each of these reporting requirements to a contractor, this would be a list that says primary prevention. You can kind of choose from this list meaningful metrics. We've been waiting for this one for a minute also, so I know it's in the finalization process, but I don't know when it will be released. But that's another tool I expect to be really useful. This is a not totally accurate map of everyone that's currently engaged with MAC. We do have some more in the Southwest that have engaged since, but I wanted to just kind of show you anyone in green is having the conversation we're having today. And anyone in gray is someone that, you know, asked a specific question, maybe a legal question or for a template or a document. Just so you know, you're not alone in having this conversation. So this is just a brief list of some of the types of technical assistance I can provide you. But again, really, if there's something that you want or need, don't hesitate, just ask. And if I can't provide it, I will find you someone that can. And then there's my contact information, but I also brought some cards with me, my cell numbers on there if you guys ever have just a quick question or want to get in touch if you want to pass those around. But any questions so far about, that was a lot, probably very quickly.
Questions for Amy? From the health department? Did anybody reach out to them?
We did.
And we didn't hear back?
We just didn't get any.
Oh, too bad.
Will now have their door.
I think so. No questions for Amy?
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Amy. Thanks for coming.
On that note, with the health department, I'm sitting
Yeah.
on multiple advisory boards in our service areas. I have a few people from the health department. I might be able to reach out and find out if there's someone that we can talk to here.
I think most definitely.
Heather would like to be here.
So I guess one question we have as a commissioner, we've really been talking about this for a while. It's great that the state's finally here, where we can really get this going. But one item we've talked about that would be a big impact right away is a body scanner for a jail. And we were told probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago from Jim that another county put in a scanner, used opioid funding, and now the Attorney General's telling them, no, you can't pay for it with that. Yeah,
Yeah, so body scanners are not at all recommended because they are in that punitive space. So we have seen multiple counties use settlement funds. One county used Meyer settlement funds, which have no restrictions, so there's no problem with the use of the Meyer funds for a body scanner. We do have a few other counties that have installed them with J&J or distributor funds. I am definitely concerned about how the AG's office is going to respond to those counties. But because it really, return on investment there is that a few more people end up in a space where they're being penalized for having substances as opposed to helped for having substances. And if you look at the data from during the pandemic, throughout the jails and prisons in the state, not just in Michigan, we've seen this in other states too, the contact visits with external family and friends were reduced or eliminated during that time frame. And we actually saw more overdose in the jail during that time frame, which means that those substances are not coming in on family or friends, or even from maybe the folks that are incarcerated, but potentially through other means like staff. And so if a body scanner is going to be used in a county, which would not be recommended with settlement dollars, but again, I can't make that determination, that's corporate counsel's decision if they feel it's allowable, but it would not be recommended. But the recommendation when using body scanners is to also scan staff to ensure that if we're really making sure that substances are not coming in, we're looking at that from all angles.
Didn't look at it like that. Any other questions? Item 4, strategy discussions and future meetings. Strategy discussions.
Yeah, what? This presentation again drives home the point of the need for data.
Yeah, we have to do a needs assessment.
That's where we maybe want to start our
First thing.
focus. And it sounds like there's an awful lot of resources that we can turn to. I do think having a health department person here would really be beneficial because they've got the data, I mean, they're dealing with it. So maybe that's our first goal, is to really try to understand what we're dealing with.
Well, and I wouldn't see a problem with using the John, who did you say did the needs assessment? Was it MSU?
Through MSU, yeah.
They're amazing.
So I feel that would be our next step.
Did you want to contact them, Tim, and see if they'd be willing to come in?
Yeah, I think if I heard you right.
Yeah, I
you,
can
and
contact them.
find out who I need to get.
Yeah, so
what were the
Go ahead.
other one? What did Wayne State?
John Hopkins.
Wayne State is doing the evaluation support, and then U of M is right now only doing webinars, wide variety of webinars. Let's see, so an MSU needs assessment, and then Johns Hopkins has the guiding principles. So they have a great tool that allows folks to really think about different aspects and align with those principles as they proceed in this process.
So the first step would be the needs assessment. What's the time frame of that?
Their current contract ends the end of this month. They will be refunded. I'm thinking in some of the other counties, somewhere between 3 to 6 months. It's not a typical year-long process, but I would also, think about what you guys are actually looking for. Some of the counties are only doing a survey that they bring to a county fair. Some folks are doing a mail out. Some folks are doing focus groups with specific stakeholders. But if you want a landscape analysis, a gap inventory, those things aren't necessarily included in what they're kind of offering right now. So if those are things that you want, I would make sure to bring them up. And if they can't offer them, I can provide those for you all.
Thoughts?
First up.
That's first up, yeah. I guess I got a few more questions.
Go ahead.
So obviously I know like this needs assessment would be specific to our county, and that's what we need, but how long have you actually been working with counties like that have actually been taking some of this money and using it? How many counties right now are at that point?
At the spending point?
Yeah.
Well, because there's no requirement that anyone talk to me, I'm not sure. I'm familiar with at least 5 counties that have already spent funds, but that's not to say that's all of them. Counties typically only call me when they need something, not when they have like progressed to that next step of planning. Although I welcome that. I have 1 or 2 counties that fill me in every step of the way, and it's been really helpful in kind of making additional recommendations throughout the process.
Keeping you on board.
So I'm seeing a few different trends. I think the criminal legal space is one where we're seeing heavy investment. So expansion of treatment and recovery courts, expansion of reentry programs from jail. One of the things that you can anticipate are additional funds being made available from the state for counties to apply for, potentially within the next couple months here, for medication to treat opioid use disorder in the jail. When we talk about medication to treat opioid use disorder in the jail, we're not just talking about medication per se, but programs that really support individuals in that process. Are you all currently doing that?
We're not having anybody come in yet.
Is the medication provided currently?
Mhm.
Okay, because so without the medication is when the counties are getting a lot of lawsuits. So I think as long as you kind of have that baseline, but there will be additional funds available to expand those programs, pay for costs of medication, as well as a technical assistance provider to help with that process. That would be no cost as well.
When you talk about medications, are you talking about like withdrawal protocols, withdrawal
Yeah.
medications?
So it'd be like Suboxone, and I don't think it will cover Sublocade, but it'll probably cover methadone and Suboxone, would be my guess. Don't hold me to that.
I don't think
That's
those are
a shame,
allowed in the
because
jail. Those aren't
Sublocade is
even
gonna be the
allowed in
best
the jail.
choices.
No.
Sublocade and Vivitrol are gonna be your 2 best choices for the
I
jails,
agree.
because they're not gonna have to take that every day. And it's sustainable when they leave the jail for reentry. They've got stable and they're on board. And that medication set for a month, they have time for follow-up and getting, in with providers, because they're gonna be able to continue that care.
Yeah, and I don't think either of those 2 medications, I don't know, I haven't seen this RFP, I don't even know that it will actually happen, it's just an expectation that I personally am making, or an assumption I'm making based on an RFP I saw go out recently for a technical assistance provider. And so, but my assumption would be, it would be Suboxone and methadone specifically.
So is there someone that we can reach out to voice that concern?
I
If
think,
this is something that we choose to do?
yeah, absolutely. I think if once that RFP is released and I can get a contact there, we can definitely, have that conversation. They know that some counties are only comfortable with Vivitrol and Sublocade, and other counties are more willing to use other medications, especially where there's, more staffing and potentially more folks coming in and out in a shorter time frame. So I think it just kind of depends on what they're looking at for
Right.
this round of funding.
And it's better for diversion issues in the jail if they don't have.
So I may have a question. When you were talking, it can't be used for punitive. But you did talk about how the courts use it and the law enforcement community. What if you have, well, I guess I need to know what the definition of punitive is, because I'm thinking of a couple examples that could be both. That could be beneficial to the person, but also potentially punitive. Like, for example, we have a lot of people that are out on bond, but then they use, and then their bond's revoked and they're sitting in jail waiting trial. There's really no way for the court to monitor them currently, but we know that opioids are water soluble. There are patches out there that we could put on a person and release them, where the court can then take the patch off, send it in to make sure they're in compliance with their bond conditions. So that would keep them out of jail, maybe even keep them into a outpatient substance program. But then if they test positive, they're going back.
So there's a punitive aspect.
So there's a punitive aspect, but it is beneficial for them to be out with the patch getting treatment. So would that be a program that we could subsidize with these funds, or would that be considered punitive?
I think that one's really tricky. I mean, I think that punitive piece is really large in that specific example. But I also think, keep those ideas of all of those different activities in mind and really see what the data and what the needs assessments show. Because it really may be that the folks that are involved with the criminal legal system at this point end up not being the highest need that you're seeing in the data. Or maybe they really are the highest need, and it really takes a stakeholder group with folks that are, have been released from jail or are a part of that program to find out how they would feel about that type of situation.
So typically you see like your drug court, your sobriety court, those people who are going through that, you fail out of that, it's punitive. You're going to go back to jail, violate probation. So if those funds were used for that, that would also be punitive if they fail out of that, which would be the same example as.
I think a lot of the court-run programs, it's a double-edged sword. It's helpful. Drug treatment courts is helpful. It gives them an opportunity to get free counseling, free treatment, supervision, medications for free, stay out of jail, maybe get their license back. There's all these benefits, but then if they mess up, yeah. So, it's a carrot and a stick type of situation. That's how that's how all your drug courts work.
Yes, and I think the point that you're making about here's these additional resources, it's not, show up for this program or go to jail. There's also counseling, there's also treatment. So if you're talking about, the patch thing again, are there additional supports available through that process? So it's really about building in the care of the whole person, really addressing the substance use disorder from a medical model, those type of thoughts. I definitely understand the punitive aspects of so many of these things. But I think a lot of times focus groups with folks that have been incarcerated, focus groups and stakeholder interviews are a way to really gauge what they feel would be important and useful to them. And I think we can't really make those decisions without their input.
So the preventative side, to me, I think of, financial money, maybe more to law enforcement, specifically targeting these people on the streets that are, helping dish out these opioids. Have you seen any of that money so far that's going to law enforcement specifically, only dealing with stopping these illegal opioids?
I'm not, because that one is definitely not recommended. When we look at Exhibit E, it talks about support for law enforcement, and it mentions kind of two things. And it's described as a non-exhaustive list, but it really, I think, fine tunes what we're looking at in the law enforcement side. One, which is support for first responders, specifically addressing secondary trauma associated with response to overdose crises. So that, crisis intervention work, critical incident debriefing, those types of things for law enforcement. The other is training. So training on how to best help individuals with substance use disorder or identify substance use disorder and co-occurring mental health conditions. And so it's really the training side around how to best help, or the supporting side in terms of addressing that secondary trauma that law enforcement is really facing. There was just a study that came out in Indiana that I think is going to be replicated in Michigan as well, that talks about when we look at drug seizures specifically, we can map the distance and time frame in which we will see an increased risk of overdose. So people who are using substances typically are familiar with a specific drug supply, and they know what their body can handle. So after a drug seizure, what happens is folks no longer have access to the same substances and therefore don't know how to appropriately dose. And so with that, we see increased overdose because folks are not familiar with that new information. So I know that there are ways in which specifically MSP and potentially the state could work together to be able to notify first responders, EMS in those areas when a seizure is going to take place. But the study from Indiana was really interesting, and I do think that they will replicate that study in Michigan in the near future.
Obviously, it sounds like it's going to target on prevention and education in these rural areas with both children and adults, because I think it's a huge needs in this area. in these rural areas is finding the staff to do it, the individuals to do it. I mean, have you heard much concern on that?
Absolutely. So the behavioral health workforce shortage is national, but very specifically bad in Michigan. The state is trying to address this with their settlement funds by offering an RFP that I think nobody saw the way that it was distributed this last time, but they will be doing it again for loan repayment for folks going into the behavioral health field. I have been trying to kind of look at the peer landscape as well. So folks that tend to go into the peer workforce then tend to go into, or a lot of them go and get, a master's in counseling or a master's in social work and become, the folks that are running these programs. And so looking at the different pathways that are available and the pipelines to the field and opening that up. Michigan's peer certification process is really unique and I think limits the amount of peers that we can have in the state. Because of the way that it's structured and forcing folks to have a job before getting a certification, as opposed to creating a skill that then makes you more marketable in the workforce. So Michigan's criteria are very different than what we see in other states across the country. And I think that is another place where we're seeing barriers, but those are really policy issues and funding issues from the state side. You can use these funds to address some of that. If you wanted to supplement part of the salary for a physician or a therapist or a psychiatrist in the county, you can use funds for that. If you wanted to create, your own kind of programs around getting folks into the behavioral health workforce, there's no easy answer with this ongoing struggle in the country, but it's definitely something where you have some wiggle room if you have very specific kind of needs in the county.
Any other questions for Amy? Comments?
I think it's very beneficial. You hit on it, the youth in the schools.
Oh, huge.
We got to hit that hard, I think.
That's where it starts.
Grab them before they start.
Just another thought is I serve on the Michigan Works Board as Ogemaw County Commissioner, and they talk about, and they have a lot of funding. Do you see a Michigan Works individual representative on these committees as well?
In some counties, I haven't seen it in every county. Some are trying to figure out where their representative is, but I think anytime you're looking at employment, education, childcare, kinship care, those are all places where I think there's going to be a need for folks at the table in those conversations. I'm seeing a lot of also focus on wanting to fund things in the recovery space. So trying to expand the recovery ecosystem. So when folks go through treatment, they're able to then have those supports, not just for short-term recovery of 6 months or a year even, but what about things for those folks that have been in recovery for over a decade? Are there additional ways to build in that ecosystem? Or is there a need for more recovery supports, whether that's peers or meetings or whatever it is that folks utilize in your community?
Any other thoughts, guys?
So it sounds like we got a plan. We're gonna contact MSU, try to get our needs assessment done as soon as possible.
With that being said, the counties you're working with that have done that through MSU, have you seen it be quite,
Informative.
formative and
One-
really help direct them?
One county was disappointed and came back to just work with me directly. All the other counties that have engaged, which are about 18 or 19 additional counties, I've not heard anything negative from. And they are still in the process. I have not seen a completed needs assessment, but they are definitely, I get updates like every week from the folks that are doing the work, just really general. And it seems like everybody is moving along, or the county has chosen to stop the needs assessment for one reason or another, typically just the fact that it's the summer. Again, if you guys aren't happy with that, reach out to me. I can do needs assessments. That's definitely something I can assist with in that process also.
Could we do both?
I mean, I think they can really offer you kind of the full thing. I'm happy to sit in on your meetings and add if I have other things to contribute. But I feel like what they're doing will be successful for what you all are looking for.
You just brought up surveys, and surveys were brought up at our meeting today, how inaccurate for this area specific are. The Census Bureau and went over some statistics today, and yeah, a lot of people do not respond to surveys, unfortunately.
And that doesn't have to be a route that you all go. You know, you may say, we only want to do interviews and focus groups. And so it takes this group really identifying who needs to be interviewed and what types of focus groups do we want to have. Yeah, you're not tied to anything. They're just offering you this kind of free service that's really a spectrum, and you pick and choose what works for you.
Well, with this,
Go ahead.
with this being obviously our first meeting, and you're gonna be the next contact for MSU to get this going for us. What would you advise for us to do for our next setup? You know, have another meeting in a month, we brainstorm a couple months, and then have another meeting, or just more way back on your timing when you hear from them?
So what'll happen is I'll put in your information, so you guys will hear from them directly. They will want to schedule 1 to 2 meetings to kind of get to know the team. And then they'll say, who else do we need to bring to the table? But I think if I'm you all at this table trying to figure out what do I do between now and next month, one, identify, is there anyone missing from this table? Are there other folks that you feel bring a lot to this conversation, or their voice or who they represent's voice needs to be heard? And then 2, what data does my organization have, or what data can I access? So not just health department data, but is there an action plan around co-occurring disorders somewhere in the county? Is there a needs assessment that was done by a community provider just based on their own services? So what other data is available, and just making sure to have everything that's available to you probably for that next meeting.
I would like another meeting in a month. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Just to continue to move forward.
That's fine.
As far as anybody else sitting here, I think obviously we mentioned the health department. Michigan Works, again, they go over a lot of stats. They have a lot of funding. Any thoughts on Michigan Works? Anybody familiar with them?
Somewhat, but
They have recovery.
Michigan works with.
They have a recovery program, yes. They have a lot of funding. Where they get it all from is unbelievable. Their budget's larger than the counties. They do a very good job at a lot of things. I think they would be an asset to the table. And then McLaren which is the other healthcare facility that's not, I work for McLaren, but I'm not here as a McLaren employee. I also would like to personally reach out to them to see if someone will represent them.
For my, if we have someone from my Michigan.
Yeah.
Oh, you're,
sorry, sitting right next to you.
Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on anybody else?
I think we,
Pardon me?
EMS.
Yes, agreed.
I mean,
I
they're
think
the
we
ones that
did.
see, they're the ones that go into the
Absolutely.
homes and see it in the house.
I thought we did reach out to them.
Those
Did
in
we respond?
the sheriff's department.
Okay, we did attempt, but again, they just said there's been a lot of
I
transfers.
was gonna say, yeah, they're juggling right now.
Agreed.
Do we want to identify who's going to talk to you for these? Like for EMS, I'm on the EMS board. I could be one.
To approach them personally? Absolutely.
That'd be cool.
I'll see Justin tomorrow morning. I already have an appointment to see him,
Oh,
and I'll make it a point to discuss tonight's meeting with him and at least gauge an interest.
Absolutely. Anybody else? I can
I
approach
think we're missing some,
Should have EM or
state.
probably state police, I would think, MSP representative.
but I also think we're missing some people that are in recovery.
Absolutely.
So there are, I know there's a couple former addicts that are now recovery coaches. One of them does like a NA meeting out in Skidway. I could reach out to them to see if they're
I think it's
interested.
changing.
We do have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm a base of long-term recovery, and I do have a smart recovery meeting at the library. It's gonna be like 2 nights a week, Thursday and Sundays. This is, I'm missing my meeting tonight for my people. I'm having great success
Are
with
those
it.
at the church?
Right.
I'm sorry,
Are those meetings at the
the
church,
library.
the library?
Well, you
We
can
have a
also have the prevention coalition here for Ogemaw County too.
Catholic Services does that too.
Shannon, do you know any other strong individuals that have been in your shoes that would maybe? fill for us?
Currently remain in your shoes. Yes.
in Ogemaw County.
Yes.
Or just want to think about it.
Yeah, let me think about it. Right offhand, I mean, I have my supervisor, she's 13 years in recovery. I think she'd be a good asset, but off the bat, as for peer recovery coaches in Ogemaw County, let me think on it.
It'd be nice, you're
Have
from
you met
Mills
Sonia
Township.
Reisner?
I'm sorry.
Sonia Reisner?
She works for Catholic Human Services.
Right, she was contracted. with
Stephanie Orlando,
Catholic Human
she's in
Services. and
Iosco.
We contracted with her to work with our family practices. So she works at Mid-Michigan, or my Michigan, but she's contracted through Catholic Human
I have
Services.
not met
I can
her
reach
yet.
out to her because,
Yeah,
yeah, she would be a good person to bring into this. I
yeah,
think.
I'd love to meet her too. For sure. Another
Well, if
coach.
you give me your contact, I can do an
Stephanie
email.
Orlando and Zach Williams, they're in Iosco. I know that they do have on sometimes to the Ogemaw Drug Free Coalition meetings.
It'd be nice, you're from Mills.
Well, MSP is there too.
It'd be nice to see other individuals from other areas. They could bring a lot to the table as far as what's going on in their area, recovering.
I could talk to Zach and Stephanie tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Yeah,
Sheriff, do you want to quarterback the MSP?
Any other thoughts?
Who's gonna quarterback for Michigan?
I'm on the board.
And then how about for health program?
We already have that taken care of.
Perfect.
Yep, and I'll talk to McLaren as well.
And then if you have a medical examiner, that would be another place for data as well.
Absolutely.
And someone that you may want at the table. I'll send over the toolkit, or if you all get a chance to go to the link for the guide for local spending, the toolkit. There's also a list of folks, local businesses, faith-based communities, a lot of other folks to be thinking about. And if that sparks any other ideas, that may be helpful. But there's a whole list in there, page long.
We were worried, initially concerned when we started talking about forming this board that we were getting too large.
Yep.
But this is just brainstorming and knowledge,
Yeah.
which is
sure.
huge. So I don't think too many, I mean, we're not making the final decision. I think that was a concern, but I think the more knowledge and the more experience, the better.
Yeah.
So any other ideas? Are you guys good with that?
Hey, talking about bringing the public in, what she was talking in the beginning about it being a public meeting, or I think it was Tim talking about it, bringing the public in. I really think, maybe we need 2 or 3, possibly even 4 meetings under our belt, so we have some real direction.
Structure.
But I think once we've accomplished that, I think advertising to bring the public in, get the public who is having these problems, because it's not the people who are having the problems that we're going to make contact with. It's the people living with the people having the problems that we're going to make the contact with. And that's where we're going to get our best information from.
I heard it this morning, my alarm was going off, 104.7 actually advertised this meeting. They were just going over some data, and they heard it or read it in the Ogemaw County Herald, but they advertised this meeting tonight.
Yes.
Did say it was open to the public, so it is being
Yes,
somewhat advertised.
so. Anyhow, that's direction. I think.
All right, so we said the future meeting is going to be a month from now. Do we have a date?
That's what I was looking at. This is tonight's Thursday. What's second Thursday? Is it third Thursday of the month?
This location is good.
Oh,
for
second
everybody?
Thursday, sorry.
Second
Today's
Thursday.
today's 10.
Well, I'm wondering because if
Well,
we
we're gonna
get
need a
more
bigger
people, we're
table.
going to need a bigger spot. We might have to go to the annex building.
Yeah, that probably would be better.
Yeah,
Yeah, boy, about 100 people.
yeah.
That's got all the necessities that we need. Second Thursday would be what date? You got your calendar open, Sheriff? 14th? You guys okay with the time?
A little struggle for me, but I'll make it work if I. Every other-
Like a little later, or what's the?
Earlier usually, because I'm coming from Claire, so it's quite a drive and I've already worked all day, so to get up here, it's not a problem, I can do it, but you know, I'm not the only one here, so.
Earlier would be better for me.
Well, let's find out from what's our.
So earlier would be better for me too, because my meeting's at 6 and tonight my phone started ringing right at 6, even though I have it out canceled for today, but however,
How early, 4:30 or 5?
whatever works for you. My meeting's from 6 to 7:30.
4:30 or 5?
We can't be before 5.
You can't be before 5, so how about 5?
That's perfect.
Kind of been-
Okay.
Hi, Pete.
Is that still good, like, for getting you guys back?
I'm good for 5.
So we're September 14th at 5 PM at the Annex Building.
And
Annex building?
And someone will put out where that's at, because I don't
Mhm.
You know where the sheriff's department is?
know.
205 South,
Public comment, I don't think there's any public comment.
205 South Main Street. It's also known.
Next meeting date and time, I think we covered that. Anything else before we adjourn?
Turn on 8th Street there.
Okay.
Mr. Bowers, did you have any?
Okay.
thank Amy.
Yes, thank you.
Sammy?
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Where you, do you have a primary location? Are you?
I'm in Lansing.
Okay, nice to meet you.
That kind of drive through.
We guys, good adjourning, we're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very.
The address here.
Let's start.
Sure.